Welcome to episode 15 of Widnes Rugby Chat in 2024 with myself, James Gordon and Mike Parsons. It's been awards night this week. Mike got his glad rags on and got down to the Bridge Suite. So, Mike, how was it?
Oh, do you know what? It was a fantastic evening, to be fair. I must admit, it is actually my first time I've ever been to them, to be honest. So I didn't really know 100% what to expect, but the room was absolutely jam-packed. 20 pound a ticket. You can imagine how many tickets they did sell. All the players that was there. It was really good to see, including the lone players. Brett Bailey was still there at the awards night, which was pleasing to see. We may need him in the next couple of games, so that was good to see. Players, sponsors, staff, everyone really. Nice sit down meal. Didn't go amiss. 2-course meal, pies, chips, and gravy. You could tell it was a Northerners function, and then fudge cake for dessert. So you can't go wrong there, can you?
Oh,
Um,
I think the last awards evening I went was the Queen died. So, I think I'm probably trying to avoid them. The Queen. I think I was helping the club. I was supporting the club in some way, helping them do something. And the Queen died on that. Like it was like a couple of hours before the do was meant to start, and obviously it was like, well, what can you do? We can't cancel the do. So I think. So yeah, that was what would that have been 2 years ago, I guess. The main attraction, I suppose, of the night was the awards, and I think it was me. I think when we were, I was trying to remember this when I was walking before, when me and you were debating Player of the Year. I think I sided with Johnston, and you sided with Fozzard,
yeah,
and it was Johnston who cleaned up. I think they said he got coaches player, fans player, and players player.
yeah, that was the case. And do you know what, James? You you can't you can't argue, can you? You know, he's been fantastic. Probably emphasised a little bit more as well because last season wasn't exactly ideal for him. Whatever the motive was for going Castleford, when he was stood up on stage, part of his speech afterwards, he mentioned and he felt he needed to prove he wanted to be here. And absolutely caps off to the lad. He's done that in abundance, hasn't he? But between the two, there's not much to split them as to really.
Yeah, I mean, as we're recording this late, we're not necessarily going to go over the Doncaster match too much, but I think since Johnston got injured against York in the first half, Widnes have. I'm not saying it's completely down to that, but certainly missed him in the middle. I think against Doncaster at the weekend, and his absence is going to be felt. It looks like for the rest of the season.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it's ironic actually. You should say that because I had Fozzard as man of the match up at Doncaster for his defensive
Yeah,
duties mainly, but you could just feel, couldn't you, because he was going the distance and going 80 minutes in attack a little bit, holding himself back, maybe reserving a little bit of energy, and obviously having Johnson for that starting 15, 20 minutes allows him to come on and really, go gung ho and pack a punch almost, going in attack and getting out of dummy half.
yeah. I mean, I give Fozzard in man of the match in League Express, but yeah, I just think obviously when Johnston's there, ultimately when Fozzard's on, Johnston's in at 13, isn't he? And he gives you a bit of something. Back to the awards. What was the definition of the Man of Steel award that Mike Butt won?
The way Alan described it was somebody who's tough, who people respect, um, somebody who people respect on and off the field and lead by example. That was his definition of it. I think if you ask people what Man of Steel actually means, probably everybody has a little bit of a different kind of perspective. But Dan Murray was sat on our table actually, and he kind of mentioned in conversation about Mike Butt. And what he said as a prop, and obviously a prop who plays long minutes, he said, when I'm on my haunches and I'm gassed and, you know, you, you're deep in your own half and it's lonely. He's always the first behind you, shouting for the ball to take it in. And I suppose that is it, isn't it? In a nutshell, when players are doing it tough, you've you've got somebody there who's prepared to roll the sleeves up, save the day, and lead by example and take the pressure off. The big fellas down the middle. I think we all see that. I think just all round, it sounds like he's a really, well respected lad in the team, and let's have it right, not many people give him a chance, did they, James? And he's done all this probably at the beginning with not a lot of backing other than probably his coach and a few supporters, support staff. Like
Yeah, yeah, certainly. I don't think many people would have preferred him over Kieran Dixon at the start of the season, but he's more than proved his case over the season. And I'll be very. I don't know whether his squad. I don't know whether his squad number is a personal choice because I'm sure I've seen him wear that number the majority of his career, or whether he'll end up with a starting shirt number next season. We'll wait and see. The other player award on the night was the Young Player of the Year, which went to Max Roberts, who I had to check how old he was. He's 24. I partly wondered whether it was just a case of he was the youngest player and that's why he won it. Now, that's taken nothing away from him. He's had a good season. But I did wonder how many were actually in the running for Young Player of the Year.
I'm so glad you mentioned that because when it was given out, I did think of you and I thought you might mention this because I do agree. Look, I like the concept of it, I guess, but maybe the wording could be a little bit different. The award could be called something else because without an academy, most of your young players naturally are loans, aren't they? But as it was Max. I think is he what 24?
Yeah, well, I think it was his birthday recently. I think he was 24 at the start of September.
Oh, well, there you go then. But no, in all fairness, again, another success story. I mean, I think I've mentioned it in weeks gone by. Did I think we'd be sat here talking about Max at the start of the year as a battle-hardened middle? Probably not. But what I really liked when he was interviewed on stage, he he got asked what was his kind of highlight of the season. And what his response was, I thought it was quite interesting a little bit, was it was actually when he had to jump back to centre and scored some tries, particularly at Featherstone, because what he was saying was, I don't want to make up the numbers or have to slot in somewhere. I wanted to know, could I do a really strong job and perform at a high level in that position also. So I thought the attitude of the lad when he said that, I thought it was really striking and impressive that I think we spoke before. It's a very difficult role to fill, isn't it? Lloyd Roby's fell victim of it a little bit. Where if you're the first person, as soon as something goes wrong, you're the person to move. And he's not just happy of doing that; he wants to do it at a high level. I thought that was really impressive.
Yeah, yeah, and I think Max Roberts deserves some accolade for this season, and that's what he got. I suppose the other newsworthy item of the night was the announcement of player departures. Now, I always find this slightly peculiar because the way Widnes do it, because they did this last season where they basically announced he was leaving, which left a gaggle, if you like. I don't know what you'd call it. Well, I suppose a collective of players is a squad, but let's call them a gaggle on this occasion. When you announce who's leaving, you end up with a list of players who you've not announced new deals for, who are basically staying, because otherwise you would announce that they're leaving. So I don't know whether we're going to end up going over this charade over the next few weeks where they announce new deals for these players who aren't leaving, as if we should be surprised. But for those who haven't seen it, I think it was five players departed. Six players. Sorry, six players departed. We knew about two, Sam Wilde and Lloyd Roby, who'd obviously already announced at North Wales Crusaders. We'd speculated about Ollie Brooks, and then we actually talked about Sam Brooks and Callum Field last week, didn't we? We were talking about their prospects. Obviously, Sam Brooks had been playing well the last couple of weeks. We mentioned about Callum Field's injury issues, and then Shane Grady was mentioned as well. It appears it's just it's been a little bit of an encore from him at the end of this season, and he's not going to play on next season either. Do you want to give us your feedback on what was said on the night, Mike?
There was just not every player had too much of a say of the reasons as to leaving. Sam took to the stage. Sam Wild, um, he basically reiterated what we already knew. Very gutted to be leaving. The impression I got is if circumstances did change, he'd be welcomed back with open arms. I think fans, players, and coaching staff would all agree, and welcome him back the same. And the other the other person who took to the stage and had a bit of a moment and a say was Callum Field, and I felt sorry for Callum. I like him as a player, I really do. I think we've had two separate episodes where we have spoke about him, and I think the first time we spoke about him, I was 50-50. I think I mentioned about his game time, his minutes, different niggly injuries, and you quite rightly pointed out last season he did play a number of games, and that probably swayed me to put him on the keep list. But it sounded to me, injuries have caught up with him, and he wants to take a break from the game. He did say take a year out and see where I'm up to. If he can rest up and hopefully get over his injury problems, whether it's Widnes or another club down the line, I think we can all agree that somebody's going to be getting a very committed, physical forward who'd be an asset to any championship team.
Yeah, you would imagine that. Well, it'd be interesting to. I mean, I guess we'll never know now. It'll be interesting to see whether he was part of the considerations for next season or whether it was a decision he's only made recently. And but obviously all the best to Callum Field, and hopefully, like I've said before, I think I wouldn't. There isn't a player I don't think who's played this season who I would be terribly unhappy to see play for Widnes again, if that makes sense. And I think Field's shown on occasion that he's a top end championship forward. So hopefully he comes back. I mean, maybe they've all been having a word with Ant Walker, who of course had a good few years off due to the brain problem that the head injury problem that he'd had. And he's come back and been all the better for it. So maybe resting up for a year might enable players to play for an extra year or two at the end. Who knows? I think it is a concern though for the game as a whole. I suppose when you see players dropping out at the prime time of the career. I'm not sure there's a great deal you can do. Rugby's very physical. The players are clearly fine-tuned to the max these days. So, yeah. So, well, like I say, we'll go through these next few weeks now, no doubt with some player announcements. But I suppose the main thing about that list is it makes you look at the ones who weren't on the leaving list and who you would assume are going to be around next season. One name particularly that springs to mind is Liam Bent, who we'd heard had been linked heavily with moves elsewhere. I wonder whether his form has persuaded Alan Coleman to retain him. He probably was out of favour, wasn't he? It's fair to say, in the first half of the season. But as the season's gone on, he's got more and more minutes, and he's been starting games of late. I know he didn't start. He's been starting games of late. And he must have proven his worth to Alan Coleman during that time.
Yeah, 100%. Few kind of through, obviously, you can imagine last night there was a lot of conversations going on in the room due to who was in there. I believe Liam Bent will be with us next year. I personally think he's full value for it. I think we can all agree, probably Liam himself going forward, he does have his, limitations. He's not got the same ball handling skills as, say, a Nick Gregson and so on and so forth. But one thing he does have is he could play 90 minutes in an 80-minute game. He is fit as anything. He tackles everything. I don't think I've seen him miss a tackle. I really don't. He's reliable. He's dependable. He's such a nice lad. And I think, look, we don't have the beauty, do we, of knowing what each individual player's on. But if you had a squad player as reliable as Liam Bent, and he's probably not in the top half of the earners at the club. I think you need players like Liam Bent. It's not all about being flashy. Sometimes you need somebody to come in and do the job. And the last couple of weeks, he got picked up man of the match at Doncaster. I thought he was fantastic up at Batley when Batley was coming down the hill. I thought his defence was spot on, and he really steadies the ship in the middle of the pitch. So I'm really pleased he's staying. To be fair, I think he's every side needs somebody like Liam Bent. I think.
I
And
think I
yeah,
think yeah, I agree. I agree with what you say. I think Liam Bent's the sort of player that, um, like you say, you need in the squad. He's fit as a fiddle. He's a nice lad. I bet he's probably good to have around the dressing room. When people talk about squad size, I think when you're a part-time club, this is not necessarily just a rugby thing. When you're a part-time club, players want to play, don't they? They want to play in the team. So it's very difficult to recruit players who you're probably thinking aren't going to be first choice. But Liam Bent strikes me as the sort of player who probably understands that he's not going to be first choice, but he doesn't mind not being first choice because he'll see that as a challenge to get in the team and maintain the team. And he's the exact sort of player that you need when you're trying to fill out a squad. And yeah, I'm happy he's staying. I guess, well, Danny Lantry and Nick Gregson are probably ones that I guess are probably a little bit unknown. I wonder whether they're maybe medical, maybe their futures are dependent on injury, and where they're up to.
I don't know an awful lot about Nick Gregson. I heard a couple of weeks ago through someone in the bridge suite talking to somebody else, and the word was like Danny is looking to play on next year, so potentially that means he will be here next year.
Yeah, well, we'll have to wait and see. I suppose the other, we haven't mentioned Joe Edge, but I know he's on the sidelines at the moment. But we both expected him to have been staying anyway. I suppose the other name that stands out is Matt Fleming. Now, I think he had a bit of an up and down game against Doncaster on Sunday, but he's been tackling very well, been playing well of late. But I wonder whether the future of Matt Fleming has been impacted by a bit of unfortunate news relating to Jake Mason, the Australian fullback that has been at Whitehaven this season, who was by all money signing for Widnes for next season. It now appears that doesn't look likely to happen. He's not played for Whitehaven for the last few weeks. There's a little bit of speculation going around about the reasons why. I can't confirm that one way or the other, but evidently he's now left the UK and gone back to Australia, and it appears he's not coming back. And I think if that does prove to be true, it's a big blow for Widnes because they'd planned on having him next year, and he was probably the key new signing that they were going to make. That's not going to be the case now, it would seem. There might be a change to that, who knows? So I wonder whether Matt Fleming He can play fullback, he can play centre, he can play on the wing. If there was an element of doubt whether he was going to be staying or not, I wonder whether the fluid situation relating to Mason meant that Widnes thought actually Fleming is we need him as part of the squad just in case they're not able to find a replacement. I mean, we're not sure how the player market really evolves. You don't know how many of the you don't know how many players are tied up already for next season, but certainly you would think that given how early Widnes apparently got the amazing deal done, that to find an alternative at a relatively late stage of the year might prove difficult.
Yeah, like I say, I'm not going to comment too much about like Jake Mason's obviously personal situation. Obviously, it's innocent, isn't it, till proven guilty. But the problem we've got and where we've landed ourselves in, not landed ourselves in, but the problem we've landed in, and it is one of them scenarios, isn't it, where you think, crikey, could we be any more unlucky? It's without knowing the full list of who's going to be coming in, you'd hazard a guess that'd have been your Stardust signing. That'd have been, your not marquee signing in money, but it'd have been the eye catcher. It'd have been the people. It'd have been the signing that would put people on the gate and get the fans in to see a bit of magic happen, a bit of speed. Sadly, that doesn't look like it's going to happen. There's not too many players around with Jake Mason's pace. Usually, if there is, they're snapped up. So yeah, it's far from ideal, isn't it? The other part of what you was kind of mentioning there, where I'm thinking more as well, is we've seen Australians in the not so distant past come on their own to Widnes, and they've not lasted too long. And obviously, it's well documented that Joey Romeo might also be coming from Whitehaven. I'm not sure what the living situations would be, but putting two and two together, maybe making five a bit, you'd assume that they was coming as a pair, and it'd be easy for them to, kind of settle into the town a bit better when there's two. Obviously, that means there's up to now, unless there's any other overseas rumours that are going to be coming our way soon, it leaves just him, and that is a little bit of a concern. Unless maybe we take it as an opportunity to look overseas and bring somebody else in, but certainly in the championship and around the championship, there's not too many players like Jake Mason that you can just click your fingers and bring in.
I mean, I don't think it's I don't think it's an overseas or an Australian recruitment drive. I think, if you look at since the administration, the only Australian players that Widnes have signed have been ones that have been over here already with other teams, and I would expect I would expect if any overseas players were to land at Widnes, it would be because they've arrived via a UK club. I'm not expecting that to change. It was in an interesting debate actually on Twitter last week with a fan who was commenting on how many overseas players there seems to be in other teams. Like Doncaster had a handful. There seems to be what I believe is a misconception that the overseas players are paid a lot of money. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm sure there are some that are, but I think what you've got to remember is a lot of these overseas players have come over here for an opportunity. They've come over here to see part of the world. They've come over here to, make the most of their life, being able to earn a little bit of money through rugby. If you're a club that can house a couple of, if you're a club who's got a house who can house a couple of players and give them a car or something between them, that then means they don't really need to earn a huge amount of money because their living costs are pretty much covered by the club itself. And then some of them players may work in the community. I know Barrow did that a few years ago. They had a couple of PNG lads whose job was to work for the community foundation in the day. So I think the reality is that the overseas players are probably not all of them, but certainly some of them are more cost effective than the English players as well. So um, whether Widnes will have to widen the net at some point remains to be seen. There are significant costs, probably upfront costs to recruiting from overseas in terms of visas and work permits and things like that. But I suppose wherever you get the players from, you want to build a competitive team. And so yeah, a massive blow really that, but we'll have to wait and see. And of course, in the IMG area, it doesn't really matter what happens on the pitch anyway. We'll end with that.
Just
Um,
getting that one in there,
yeah.
eh?
In fact, speaking of IMG, I should mention this because Stuart Glendenning tweeted me. Tweeted me today, and so I should mention it before we go on to your questions, Mike. If you've got any gathered, um, Stuart supports podcast. Thanks for your tweets. I'm always happy to answer questions and get into debates with people. Stuart's point was, how does Salford get effectively nearly 3 more points than Widnes in the IMG grading points? Stuart's point was that we're both tenants in new stadiums. We've both and his argument was Widnes got more fans, have more fans. Now he did caveat that by saying in Super League, which of course Widnes aren't in Super League at the moment, and so they can only be judged on the fans that they pull in the Championship. I can get what he was getting at, but it didn't actually take me too long to prove why Salford are worth 3 more points than Widnes. The big one at the moment is league position. 1.5 points, 1.5 points at least is the difference between Salford and Widnes. I think Salford are up about 5th average over the last 3 seasons. I think Salford are 5th or 6th, something like that. I think they're 5th actually, and Widnes are down in like 20th, 21st, something like that. So that's worth 1.5 points. Catchment area, we've talked, I think, about the population of Halton being just shy of the criteria where it jumps up. So that's 0.5 point. And then turnover, which naturally is higher for Super League clubs, is I would estimate Salford's is worth 0.75 point. So that is nearly 3 points there. But then I had a few other ones. Attendance, I worry that Widnes's score may drop because the average attendance may have dropped beneath 3,000. Now 3,000 is the way the attendances work. It's 7,500, then it's 3,000. So if you're above 3,000, you get so many points. If you're above 7,500, you get so many points. But if Widnes were to drop below 3,000, they would lose points based on last year's calculation. I've put 0.25 point for TV viewership. Naturally, Salford get TV viewership because they're in Super League. 0.125 for your fancy LED advertising boards. These ones, I should say, were just possible differences. The digital one and the fandom one is a bit of guesswork because it's all based on social media, so that could be anything. Foundation, I've put 0.5 point because I know the Salford Foundation is quite active, and I think it's based on the Foundation's activity and turnover. I'm just not sure where Widnes are at. I don't seem to hear a great deal about Foundation-specific activity. So, yeah, I mean, the fact that we're talking about all this is just a nonsense anyway. But the clubs have got until 30th of September to fill in surveys or data capture sheets relating to things like attendances, social media following, blah, 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 blah. And then the RFL or IMG will collate all those things, and at some point they'll announce what score everybody is. I still think Widnes will be around 15th or 16th, and I think that will be the case probably for as long as it exists. I think it's very difficult to see just how Widnes can increase the points tally that they have, and that's the unfortunate situation at the moment.
I think the way the land lies, I think you're going to be the best of the rest, aren't you? And there's going to be a bit of a cut off then, isn't there, in terms of you and the rest? I hope that providing we can up our score a little bit. I think it's going to take 2 or 3 years, isn't it, to improve that on-field score. Obviously, we've got 2 games to go to try and secure a playoff place, which will go towards that for future years. The attendances, I've banged the drum in the past. I really hope the club are going to make a big song and dance over season tickets this year, because I agree with you. I think the attendances are a little bit of of a concern. Are we going to make that 3,000 barrier? I have got some information around the Toulouse game for one of the questions at the end of the podcast, which may give us a bit of an idea of what the attendance will be against Toulouse. But back to Stuart's point, I agree with you, James. I think talking about the pillars, you're probably there or thereabouts. You're not far off. I think where Stuart's probably right is it's the pillars that's the problem. Like, it's the scoring of them. It's some of the pillars. It's just madness. Like, how there's not a pillar, for example, of homegrown talent / academies is beyond me. But that's what it is.
I think the bottom line is, and I think probably Stuart is probably getting to this point a little bit. I think the bottom line is it's weighted in the favour of the Super League club. So a club that's currently in Super League will always naturally score more than a club outside of Super League in most areas. I think we'll see London are an anomaly because they weren't a Super League club till this year. Ultimately, the top scoring teams are the 12 Super League teams from last season. The only one that's threatening maybe to get in the mix is Toulouse. And that is, Toulouse are a little bit of a special case in some ways, because they're a big club that they're financed in a certain way. But in terms of everybody else, the Super League clubs are at an advantage. And I strongly believe that, and I've said this for many years, I think, there's the big 6 or 7 clubs. But if you take Huddersfield, Salford, Casford, whoever, out of that bottom end of Super League and just replace them with Widnes, Bradford and York, for instance, I don't think you would see a great deal of difference in the clubs. I think what would happen is they'd all just swap relative size. So Widnes would effectively have the turnover Salford do now, and Salford would have the turnover Widnes do. And I think that's what my biggest issue is with the grading criteria, is that you're judging clubs based on their current situation, and it's Widnes can't get a Super League turnover because they're not in Super League. Widnes can't get Super League TV viewership because they're not in Super League. And it's not Salford's fault per se, but I just think it's flawed when you're comparing clubs in different, on a different. They're on different playing fields ultimately, and that's not me saying Widnes should be in Super League and Salford shouldn't. But I just think it shows how flawed the system is. I think I said when we did the episode with Matt Shaw, I just don't see why they couldn't just say. I mean, Hull are probably a good example as to why this isn't going to be the case, I suppose. But then I don't see why they couldn't just say the Grade A teams are protected, and then you just have normal promotion relegation between the Grade B teams. So the 12th place Super League team would get replaced by the top Championship team, assuming that they were Grade B, and then your motivation if you're a Grade B is to get up to a Grade A to protect your to preserve your Super League status. But no one listens to me, Mike. So yeah.
We have all the answers here, don't we? Maybe IMG need to tune into the podcast.
Maybe they do. Toulouse are in town on. In fact, should we do questions first, Mike? Let's do questions first.
Yeah, I've got like kind of what I've been doing a few bits of workings out. Actually, I've got I think 4 questions from other people, but I've got one kind of from myself to you, James. So out of the I think 18 players we've got now, I've done a bit of a breakdown here, and there are a couple of players who have shoehorned and pigeonholed into a position, but obviously they can play multiple positions. So, for example, I've got Ryan Lannon as a back rower, but obviously he can play in the middle as we know. But out of the 18, we've got one fullback, two wingers, two centres, two halfbacks, three props, two hookers, three back rowers, Rodri Lloyd, Danny Langtry, and using as Ryan Lannon as a third, and three loose forwards using Max Roberts, obviously Gregson, and I've classed Liam Bent as a loose forward, but he again comes into that middle category. Where do you think we need to recruit and signing? So I've got for us to try and get to 27 players and recruit 9 players. Now I think you need a strong winger to compete with Button-Ince. I think 2 versatile backs, one to cover the Lloyd Roby role, and then another, maybe like Joey Romeo, potentially. 1 halfback, 3 props, 2 of which need to be, I think, in mind to be in your 17 every week. And then I'd have 1 back rower, a quality back rower coming in with, obviously, providing Danny Langtry's still there. Obviously, it's a bit of an injury record there. Rodri Lloyd, and you want Ryan Lannon really to be able to operate in the middle. So that's me 9. What about you?
So this is based on. So you've not factored in any of the rumored signings. You're just basing that on the 18 current players.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think a centre needs to be priority. I think we need to try and find. Like we've discussed, though, it's difficult because there aren't many of them. There aren't many strong, hard-running centres out there. But I think I'm trying to think of the lad who was at Batley who went to
Buchanan.
possibly, someone of that ilk, maybe who you can play in the centres and might do a bit.
Yeah, definitely a centre. Sorry, I think
I mean, you always need props.
strike centre. Definitely. Sorry. Yeah.
A strike centre. I think Fleming. I think if you get a strike centre, I then think that Fleming becomes your utility back option. Whether that's covering at fullback or in the centres. Props. I think you just sign as many props as you can humanly possibly find. I think it'll be interesting. I suppose it's hard, isn't it? Because you sat there now thinking you want 27 players, but then you're thinking, well, are you going to utilise the dual reg? Clearly, at times this season, it's been a little fractured with Warrington. Whether a year older and wiser or a year into it, Alan Coleman will feel a bit more confident in that he's going to get the quality that he wants from. It's worth noting that how many did Widnes have this season? 24, I think.
Yeah.
And even with 24, they were struggling at the start of the season to get Lucas Green as an example in the Widnes team because everybody was fit. So I wonder how much of that. I wonder how much that'll play because clearly props are probably the easiest dual reg position to squeeze in. I think winger as well. I think if you've got your utility back cover option in Fleming and maybe another, you're looking at if one of your wingers goes down injured. We've got Regan Sumner at the moment who did all right in the game against Wakefield. Do you just wait? Do you just have that up your sleeve so that if you do suffer, your winger cover comes from somewhere else? I don't know. Listen, I think it's going to be an interesting few months. The key positions are tied up, you would say. I think halfback's the interesting one. I certainly think. I mean, obviously Depp Parton's being talked about. I do think, although Joe Lyons has been solid enough, I do think to go to the next level, Widnes need another halfback. And then, for me, centre and halfback and props for me would be top priority. The fullback situation, clearly if Mason had come he was going to be coming as fullback, but of course you've still got Jack Owens, and I think ultimately I don't think it's the end of the world if Jack Owens is the starting fullback, because I just don't see the issues with him. If you end up with another fullback, if it became a money thing and there was a good fullback, and you couldn't afford a fullback and a halfback, I'd try Jack Owens at 6 maybe. But yeah, I think
Possibly.
yeah, go on. That's what I'll go with. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, I think just to finish as well on that, as like, Jack Owens, I think no doubt he'll be number one again next year. But, let's have it right as well. Fleming's probably played his best rugby for Widnes at fullback as well. So you've got that option again.
Yeah,
Although
and,
we've not
and it,
seen it as
he
much this year.
he might want to be saying to Alan Coleman, well, what you've been doing with Lloyd Roby and Jack Owens, why can't you do that with me?
Mhm.
And I'm not saying that might be a potential option. Who knows? So yeah.
What are the club trying to do to increase Saturday's attendance? Well, actually, I think Alan's last 10 minutes or so speech. I'll tell you something, by the way. We do need to get Alan on the podcast, certainly building up, to the season tickets, because it was a heck of a speech he gave. I'm not going to try and go over it because I wouldn't be able to give it justice, but he had the room in the palm of his hand, and it was entertaining to say the least. But what he did say in there was, I think 1,400 tickets have been given out in the local area to kids at primary schools, etc., etc. So hopefully there'll be a good return of bums on seats at least from that. Um, how many people that generates in terms of buying a season ticket for next year or coming back next year, who knows? But I suppose a bum on a seat is better than it being empty. So that's, I suppose, kind of an inkling in terms of what they're trying to do. Obviously, Saturday as well. I don't know if people are aware, but afterwards in the Bridge Suite, I think Roy Basnett's going to be DJing afterwards. So again, families all invited upstairs to have a laugh and a bit of a party afterwards, with it being the last home game. So there's a couple of things going on there, And I think, I suppose there is the argument of, yeah, well, 1,400 tickets are free, but they're going to people, and it's the right incentive, and they're trying to get young kids back through the turnstiles. And let's have it right, James. There's not too many kids in recent years that are knocking about, are there, in the stands?
No. Yeah, like I say, I think it's a Saturday night game, so hopefully I believe the weather's going to be good at the weekend as well. So hopefully it'll be a good occasion.
Absolutely, and it is all hands to the pump, isn't it? Really, we've got 2 games left. Alan said in the Bridge Suite, one thing I will say is he promised we would make the playoffs. He stood on stage. He delivered that message. One win gets us in. I don't care what anybody says. We will make the playoffs. I trust this group. So it's all hands to the pump, and the fans have a part to play in it. So anybody who's listening, who's umming and ahhing, get down under the lights. Let's try and get the lads first time round out the 2 games over the line.
Yeah. Have we got any other questions before we move on to this Toulouse game?
Yes, just a few, mate. This kind of ties in back to the IMG stuff we was going over. What extent do you think IMG and the criteria has on attendances at Widnes? Do you think it's impacted it negatively? Are people staying away because of IMG at Widnes, or do you think it's just an excuse?
Um, I wouldn't necessarily attribute it straight away to IMG or I think it's a rugby league thing. I think rugby league fans or casual rugby league fans in general are just a bit fed up of all the chopping and changing and the uncertainty. Like we were saying at the start of the year, when Widnes started really well and people are asking you, oh, can Widnes get promoted? Can Widnes do this? You're basically saying, well, no, because now it's decided by the IMG criteria. So there's always multiple reasons for attendances dropping, but I do think that it can't be good, can it? No fan no sports fan wants sport to be decided by paperwork and things like that. So, and it's no coincidence when teams do well or they're heading towards cup finals or whatever that you get more fans. Well, imagine if they said, right, cup finals, instead of playing it on the pitch, we're going to go into an office and draw up a load of graphs and stuff. No one would go to the cup final if they did that. So, yeah.
My opinion on that is, from a Widnes point
I
of
don't
view,
blame that completely, and it shouldn't just be used as an excuse, but it has some impact for sure.
yeah, I think to a few people that's fair. I think Widnes' problem at the moment, I think I've said it before, I think it's previous years. And if you don't buy a season ticket, I think it's all the more harder of getting walk-ups, especially in this day and age. I think we've I think we'd be best placed to answer this question probably next year. If we can make the playoffs, we'll have had a successful season. We'd have had a coach for two seasons on the spin. Hopefully, you'd be building a bit of a community and a culture back again, and see where we are after that. I think attendances certainly at the start of the year really suffered because people was fed up of the product on the field. And look, in years gone by, it hasn't been good enough, but this year, large parts of it has. So let's hopefully we see more season ticket sales sold this year. What has happened to the transparency of Members Mondays?
Well, I mean, that's probably not a question for us. It's a question for the club, I guess. Yeah, I don't know, and I do think it's difficult because I think ultimately the club's basically one or two people, isn't it? Realistically, it's a part-time rugby club that's probably got one or two full-time back office staff who are doing whatever they do to keep it ticking over. How much? I'd almost argue how much is there to tell at the moment, and whether actually that is what the issue is, perhaps. I don't know. I think not just Widnes, but there's everyone in rugby league's in a bit of a survival mode, aren't they? And so I don't feel like there's not. I don't sit here and feel like there's loads of unanswered questions that annoy me. I do think there's things that I would like to know, but yeah, it's not at the moment. I don't feel like that's what's putting me off, or not. Nothing's putting me off, but I don't think that's what's necessarily putting fans off. I don't see there being I don't see that if all of a sudden we have transparency on Members Mondays that things would change a great deal. But I think it's a valid question.
It is to be fair. Look, I'm a bit different to you, James. Obviously, you do a lot of media work, and I do like a good Members Monday. I don't lie. I won't lie there. But what I will say is, first of all, if you sign up to VIPs, there's a question and answers night on the 25th with Alan Coleman. So that's a good opportunity to, if you're not signed up to VIPs, sign up, and there's opportunities there to ask questions to the gaffer. But also what I would say is, regardless of whether there are Members Mondays or not, the atmosphere that's created now in the Bridge Suite after the game, all the directors go in there, Chris Hamilton's in there, Alan's in there, players are in there, coaching staff are in there, and as far as I've seen, and I've asked questions in the past myself, I've never been turned away. I've sometimes might not have got the answer that I thought was right or what I wanted to hear as such, but the people are there to go up after the game, even if it's just for a pint or you just want to nip in and ask somebody a question. They will give you time of day. I've seen
Yeah,
it time and time again. So
and
potentially, if there is anything on your mind as such to the person who's asked this question, maybe it's a case of pop up after the game against Toulouse and whoever you want to ask the question to, maybe just approach them in there.
yeah, and I think to be fair, I think the current directors, um, I think they're, with respect to them, I think they're probably the sorts of people who probably don't actually want to be on a stage on a members Monday answering questions. But I think they're the sort of people that, like you say, if you have a chat with them in the bridge suite or at a game on a one-to-one level, they probably are more than happy to have the chat with you. They're probably just not the sort of people who want to be up on the stage answering questions. Chris Hamilton's probably that sort of person, or he's I guess the face of it at the moment. But I think the problem is with asking Chris Hamilton the question is that he's an employee of the club. He's head of operations, but it's the directors who've got to be setting the long term strategy and direction of the club. And I think probably sometimes some of the questions that people want to ask are related to that more so than asking. I'm sure Chris Hamilton will tell you what's happening with the day to day running of the club and the challenges it faces. But when it comes to the nitty gritty, where are we going? Where do you want to be? Where does the club want to be? Ultimately, that has to go with the directors. And I just feel like I said, I feel like the directors at the moment are people who I'll have a chat with you, no problem. I don't have any problems with them. I've had chats with them at games, but probably just not the sort of people who fancy sitting in a room with 200 people asking them questions. And you might argue that they have a bit of a responsibility to do that, but at the same time, they're the custodians at the club at the moment because it needed saving, and they were there to save it. So, yeah.
Yeah, no.
Right. So, is that it?
Sorry, go on, mate.
No, I was going to say we'll move on to Toulouse. If that's the last one, we'll move on to the Toulouse game. So Saturday night, 6:00, Toulouse at home for Widnes. Toulouse are going to finish second in the championship, which means there'll be a nice away day for somebody in the playoffs. But Bradford are keeping them honest, and it's a bit of an issue for Widnes because Toulouse can't really afford to slip up against Widnes because that will open the door of opportunity for Bradford. For Widnes, as you alluded to earlier, one win out of the two games is enough for Widnes to reach the playoffs because both York and Featherstone can't get to 30 points. They could both get to 29 technically if they drew with each other on the last game. And I think they've both got a better points difference than Widnes. Featherstone's is only marginally better. So, well, that might be one to look out for, Mike, to be honest, because if results go a certain way, York and Featherstone could collude with each other to draw their final game to get them both in the playoffs ahead of Widnes.
Well, James, if there was ever going to be a way that we'd miss out, wouldn't that be just a Widnes way, a draw?
Yeah. So if York were to beat Sheffield this week, that's right, isn't it? Yeah, and Featherstone are playing Dewsbury, so they'll win that. York and Featherstone would both have 28. Right, even if Widnes were to win one of the two games, Widnes would end up on 29, which would effectively mean that to displace Widnes, York and Featherstone, if they both drew, they would both get in the playoffs ahead of Widnes, depending on points difference. So yeah, we'll talk about that next week to see whether it's still on the cards. But I suppose much like the last home game against York, which feels like a terribly long time ago now, even though it was only a week or so ago. Widnes went into that game knowing if they won, they were in the playoffs. They're going into this game knowing if they win, they're going to be in the playoffs. Can they get the job done?
Well, it's dragged on a little bit, hasn't it? You know, we keep said this for a couple of weeks now, but I think fundamentally, you've got to say, well, complete your sets and you've got a chance. I think what Doncaster did very well was they did what York did, but respected the ball as well and punished us. Whereas York was as bad as us at long periods of the game. I think Toulouse would be looking at them two games and think trap Widnes, long kicking game, struggles to get out their own end, and you know let them make the mistakes and we'll feed off that. But look, you could see Alan was disappointed. If we're going to win the game, you've got to be running with more of a one-on-one purpose with ball in hand this week. You've got to be making more meters. You've got to be playing higher up the pitch, and you've got to be kicking well and ending your sets, and you've got to be putting Toulouse in uncomfortable positions. That's the reality of the situation. If we spend most of the time in our own half again, you're going to be chasing the scoreboard because I know Toulouse are missing quite a lot of players themselves. Looking at the squad this week, but there's quality all over that pitch. You can't afford to be playing the game in your own half for long periods of time. You simply can't do it.
Yeah, I think Doncaster did that really well on Sunday, where they pinned Widnes into the corner, continually at the start. They got the points on the board, and even when they got 10 or 12-0 up, it felt like a very long way back for Widnes, even at that early stage, just because Widnes don't look like scoring a lot of points at the moment. I think they scored 14, didn't they, in the end on Sunday, but if you look at the last few games, not been scoring points at all, apart from the Sheffield game at home. That's the first time scored more than 12 for a good 6-7 weeks. So, yeah, it's a Widnes just a little blunt in attack at the moment, and running out of time to put it right. I think I mentioned this last week, but I remember speaking to Alan Coleman after the Whitehaven game. We had a little bit of a chat about playoffs and stuff, and he said to me about the Barrow game, and I assured him, I said, it'll definitely, I don't know why you're worrying about that, Alan. Playoffs will definitely be sorted before the Barrow game. Um, I had every faith at that stage that that's what would happen. Well, they've got one more game to get it sorted before the Barrow game.
Before panic stations.
Yeah, and that, because there's every chance. I think Barrow play Wakefield this week, don't they? So regardless of what happens this week, Barrow are going to need a result in the final game to make sure they avoid that dreaded playoff match. And Widnes haven't got the greatest record at Barrow either. So, yeah. So, before we sign off then, Mike, predictions for Saturday. Are Widnes going to get it done on Saturday, and we're all going to rejoice at the fact we've sealed the playoff place and we've got an extra week of rugby to get to?
What a terrible, horrible, horrible question that is. Do you know something? I, for a good few weeks had I had a good feeling about the Toulouse game on the Saturday. I thought this would be the year where we'd do them at home. I thought we was very close last year, and I think we're a better team now. The one thing that has massively swung that and changed that for me and my gut feeling now is the injury. The injury report, we've not really touched upon it too much, but it was pretty grim reading to the point of you reading it and thinking, there's not too many of them that are going to be returning. So what you've got is almost what you've got. Working out the team. If it's not Martin Riley on the bench, it's probably going to be Kieran Tyler or Regan Sumner. So it's a tough ask. I think answering it with all honesty, I can see it going to the last day, I'm going to say we'll get over the line up at Barrow if you're pushing me to it. What about you?
I honestly don't know at the moment. I think part of me is disappointed that we're not going to have a home playoff now, barring because even if you win both the games, I think if you look at the fixtures, I think even if winning both the games, Sheffield's win last week probably tips it over. I suppose it could still, if you win both, I suppose you could probably get the home game depending on how Sheffield do this week. But I think I've still not quite got over the disappointment of not having a home playoff. But now it's getting to the point where it's actually, well, might not make the playoffs altogether, which I think would probably be a travesty based on how the season has gone. So I wouldn't like to say, but I don't think it'll be done this week. I think it's going to be squeaky bum time next Sunday at Barrow, and it might even be. I mean, there is a possibility that you can squeeze in without winning a game. Now, clearly that means you're reliant on you base. Featherstone are going to beat Dewsbury, aren't they? So you're basically then banking on Sheffield beating York and Featherstone beating York in the last two games. If that happens, Widnes have got more points than York, so would stay in the playoffs even if they didn't win. That to me, well, that's the squeaky bum time that we're probably looking at.
You don't really want to be making. I know it's better than not making them at all, but it would be a bit lackluster if we got in the playoffs without winning two games, wouldn't it? But
Yeah.
what I will say is from last night and being at the club, being around a lot of the players, what Alan said on stage, there's no nerves. That they look in full control and they look really comfortable with the situation, and they are really confident that they're going to make the playoffs. There's no doubt about that. No doubt in my mind of their confidence. There's no nerves at all. So, fingers crossed. It could be this weekend, but who knows? I'm going to stick to my guns though. I think it might be done at Barrow, and I think we might win.
Well, that we'll leave it there. We might end up having to go and win at Bradford for the third time this season. You never know. We'll look forward to that on the postage stamp. Odd so. Thanks everyone for listening. Please do keep your comments coming via Facebook and Twitter and everywhere else. We hope to see you at the game at home to Toulouse on Saturday, 6:00. But from myself and Mike, that's it for now.